They say a parent's love is unconditional, a bond that can never be broken. But what happens when that love is not just tested, but utterly shattered, twisted into something monstrous by the very child you brought into this world? I'm still struggling to process it, even now, months later. My own son, our flesh and blood, stood above us, his face a mask of cold fury, as he deliberately pushed my husband and me off a cliff. He did it to silence us, to bury a terrible secret he thought we'd uncover. As we plummeted, the wind screaming past our ears, my husband, bless his quick thinking and unwavering spirit, managed to whisper 2 words that saved our lives. Pretend we're dead. Can you even begin to imagine the horror? Your own child, attempting to murder you? Tell me, was there any other way we could have handled this? What would you have done if your son tried to kill you? I need to know if I'm crazy for feeling what I feel, for doing what we did next. It all started so innocently, didn't it? As most nightmares often do. Our son, Michael, was always a bright kid, maybe a little too ambitious for his own good, but we loved him fiercely. He was our only child, and we poured everything we had into giving him the best life possible. We weren't rich, but we made sure he never wanted for anything important. We sacrificed, we saved, and we encouraged him in all his endeavors. He excelled in school, went to a prestigious university, and then landed a high-flying job at a major investment firm. We were so proud, beaming every time he told us about his promotions, his growing success. He'd visit us every few months, always dressed impeccably, radiating an aura of confidence and achievement. We thought we had done everything right, that we had raised a good, successful man. Looking back, I can see the cracks now, subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He became more distant, more guarded. He'd brush off our questions about his work with vague answers, and sometimes, there was a flicker in his eyes, a tension in his jaw, that I couldn't quite place. I dismissed it as the stress of his demanding career. My husband, Robert, was a little more perceptive. He'd often say, "Something's not quite right with Michael, Mary. He's changed." I always defended our son, chalking it up to Robert's overprotective nature. Oh, how I wish I had listened to Robert then. The real trouble began about a year ago. Michael started investing heavily in a new tech startup. He was incredibly excited about it, talking about how it was going to make him a multimillionaire, how he'd finally be able to give us the life of luxury we deserved. He even tried to convince us to invest our life savings, our retirement fund, into this venture. Robert and I, being cautious and having worked hard for every penny, politely declined. We told him we were proud of his ambition, but we weren't risk-takers. This seemed to annoy Michael, though he tried to hide it. He became even more obsessed with the company, working longer hours, barely sleeping. His visits became rarer, and when he did come, he was always on his phone, always talking about deals, mergers, and potential investors. He seemed to be under immense pressure. Then, about 6 months ago, we started hearing rumors. Whispers in the local community, snippets of news online that mentioned financial irregularities at the very company Michael was so heavily invested in. At first, it was just speculation, but then a full-blown investigation was launched by regulatory authorities. We called Michael, concerned, asking him if he was okay, if he was involved. He vehemently denied any wrongdoing, assuring us it was all baseless slander, a smear campaign by competitors. He sounded so convincing, so indignant, that we believed him. How could we not? He was our son. The news grew worse. The company's stock plummeted, and it became clear that it was a massive Ponzi scheme, defrauding thousands of investors out of their life savings. People lost everything. The CEO and several top executives were arrested. We watched the news with growing dread, our hearts sinking deeper with each report. We tried to reach Michael, but his phone went straight to voicemail. Days turned into a week, and still no word. We were frantic, terrified for him. Then, a detective came to our door. He showed us a photo, a blurry image of Michael, standing next to the disgraced CEO at a lavish party. The detective explained that Michael was not just an investor. He was suspected of being a key player in the scheme, recruiting other investors, using his charisma and connections to lure people in. Our world collapsed. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. Our son, a criminal? A con artist who had ruined countless lives? It was unthinkable. We denied it, of course, tried to explain that there must be a mistake, that Michael would never do such a thing. The detective was patient but firm, telling us that they had evidence, that Michael was now considered a fugitive. They asked for any information we had about his whereabouts. We honestly didn't know. He hadn't been in touch for a week. We were devastated, numb with shock and grief. How could our son have done this? All those years of hard work, all the love we had given him, had it all been for nothing? Had we failed him somehow? We spent days in a fog, barely eating, barely sleeping. Then, one evening, a few weeks after the detective's visit, Michael called. His voice was strained, hoarse, but it was him. He told us he was in trouble, deep trouble, and needed our help. He wouldn't elaborate over the phone, just said he needed to see us, immediately, in person. He asked us to meet him at our old family cabin, nestled deep in the woods, a place we hadn't visited in years. It was remote, secluded, a perfect place for a private conversation. We hesitated, unsure what to expect, but the parental instinct, that deep-seated need to protect your child, even a flawed one, kicked in. We packed a small bag and drove to the cabin, a sense of foreboding growing with every mile. The drive was long and silent, each of us lost in our own thoughts, grappling with the magnitude of what our son had become. When we arrived, the cabin was dark and eerily quiet. Michael was waiting for us inside. He looked haggard, his usually impeccable clothes rumpled, his eyes bloodshot. He was a shadow of the confident young man we knew. We rushed to him, embracing him, tears streaming down my face. "Michael, what have you done?" I choked out. He pulled away, his expression hardening. He led us to the living room, sat us down, and then, slowly, meticulously, he began to tell us everything. It was worse than we could have imagined. He wasn't just a pawn. He was deeply involved, one of the architects of the scheme. He had stolen millions, ruined lives, and now, he was being hunted. He admitted to everything, but there was no remorse in his voice, only a cold, calculated desperation. He said he had a plan to escape, to disappear, but he needed our help. He needed us to provide an alibi, to lie to the authorities, to give him money, to act as his shield. He wanted us to become accomplices. That's when Robert, my steadfast, moral husband, finally spoke up, his voice firm despite his pain. "Michael," he said, "we can't do that. We can't lie. We can't break the law. You need to turn yourself in, son. It's the only way." Michael's face contorted with rage. His eyes, once so full of warmth, were now blazing with a terrifying intensity. "No," he roared, slamming his fist on the table. "I'm not going to prison. I'm not losing everything I've built." He stood up, pacing frantically, his words becoming more erratic. He accused us of not loving him, of not supporting him, of wanting to see him fail. It was a terrifying transformation, like watching a stranger inhabit our son's body. We tried to reason with him, to appeal to the son we knew, the boy who had once been kind and gentle. But he was gone, replaced by this desperate, cornered animal. He became convinced that we would turn him in, that we would expose him if he didn't escape immediately. He saw us not as his parents, but as obstacles, as threats to his freedom. The air in the cabin grew thick with tension, palpable and suffocating. We were trapped in a nightmare, watching our child unravel before our eyes. He started talking about how he needed to silence anyone who knew too much, anyone who could implicate him further. And then, he looked at us, his parents, with an expression that sent a shiver of ice down my spine. That's when it hit me. He was talking about us. So that's the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. Here we were, in our secluded family cabin, deep in the woods, with our son who had just confessed a massive fraud and was now looking at us like we were his next problem to eliminate. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have tried to overpower him? Would you have begged for your lives? Or would you have played along, hoping for an opening? I truly need to know, because what followed was the most terrifying ordeal of our lives, and I still question if we did the right thing. Michael's eyes darted around the cabin, then fixed on the old hunting rifle that hung above the fireplace, a family heirloom, unloaded for years. He made a move towards it, and that's when Robert, with surprising speed for a man his age, tackled him. A fierce struggle ensued, a father fighting his own son, not out of anger, but out of pure, desperate self-preservation. I screamed, trying to pull Michael off Robert, but he was surprisingly strong, fueled by panic and adrenaline. He managed to break free, grabbing a heavy poker from the fireplace. He swung it wildly, connecting with Robert's arm. Robert cried out in pain, but he didn't give up. He knew, we both knew, that our lives depended on this moment. Michael, seeing the poker had little effect, suddenly changed tactics. He pushed past Robert and burst out the cabin door, running towards the cliff face that overlooked the valley, a dangerous drop we had always warned him about as a child. He's trying to escape, I yelled, but Robert, nursing his injured arm, seemed to understand something deeper. He's not escaping, Mary. He's luring us. And he was right. Michael stopped at the very edge of the cliff, turning to face us. He had that wild, cornered animal look again, his eyes wide and vacant. You won't tell anyone, he shrieked, his voice echoing eerily across the empty valley. We slowly approached him, trying to calm him, to talk some sense into him. Michael, please, let's just talk this through, I pleaded, my voice trembling. Robert tried a different approach. Son, listen to me. We love you. We can help you, but you need to come back from that edge. Michael just shook his head, a chilling, vacant smile spreading across his lips. No. You'll talk. You'll always talk. And then, with a sudden, unexpected lunge, he shoved Robert with all his might. Robert stumbled, teetering on the precipice. I lunged forward to grab him, but Michael was faster, pushing me too. With incredible force, the world tilted. The ground vanished from beneath us. As we tumbled over the edge, the wind snatched the breath from my lungs. I remember a flash of blue sky, then jagged rocks, then the horrifying realization that our son had just tried to murder us. It felt like an eternity, but it was probably only a second or two before Robert, his voice barely audible over the roaring wind, whispered those two crucial words, "Pretend we're dead." He had landed awkwardly, his body cushioned slightly by some thick brush on a narrow ledge about 20 feet down from the top. I landed beside him, my ankle twisting beneath me with a sickening crack. Pain shot through me, but adrenaline and the terror of the situation numbed most of it. We lay there, absolutely still, our eyes closed, hearts pounding against our ribs like trapped birds. We could hear Michael above us, shouting, "Did you hear that? They are gone. They are gone." There was a triumphant, almost manic edge to his voice. We heard him pacing, then silence. It felt like an hour, but it was probably only a few minutes before we heard his footsteps receding, then the faint sound of his car starting and driving away. He was gone. He thought he had succeeded. Slowly, painfully, we opened our eyes. Robert, despite a nasty cut on his forehead and several bruises, was surprisingly lucid. "We have to get out of here, Mary," he said, his voice a strained whisper. "He might come back to check." My ankle was throbbing, but I knew he was right. We couldn't stay. We had to pretend to be dead, not just to Michael, but to everyone. If he thought we were alive, he would come back to finish the job. We scrambled, or rather, Robert dragged me, further down the side of the cliff, seeking cover amongst the dense trees and undergrowth. We knew this area well from years of hiking. There was an old, disused hunter's trail that led around the base of the cliff and eventually to a small, forgotten road about 5 miles away. It was a long, excruciating journey. Every step was agony for my ankle, but Robert wouldn't let me give up. He supported me, practically carried me at times, his own body aching and bruised. We didn't dare use our phones, knowing Michael might have a way to track us. We didn't talk much, the horror of what had happened hanging heavy in the air between us. Our son. Our own son. By the time we reached the road, it was dark. We were exhausted, bleeding, and traumatized. We stumbled into a small, roadside diner, looking like something out of a horror movie. The waitress gasped when she saw us. We quickly spun a story about a hiking accident, a fall down a ravine. We couldn't tell them the truth. Not yet. We needed to be safe first. We called an ambulance, got treated for our injuries, and then, from the safety of a hospital room, we began to formulate a plan. We knew we couldn't go back to our old lives. Michael would be looking for us, expecting us to be gone. We had to truly disappear. We contacted a trusted friend, an old lawyer acquaintance of Robert's, explaining only that we were in extreme danger and needed to vanish. He was shocked but understood the gravity in our voices. He helped us liquidate some assets discreetly, set up new identities, and move to a remote, undisclosed location several states away. It was a painful process, leaving everything behind, but we had no choice. We had to save ourselves from our own child. The hardest part was the silence. Not being able to talk to anyone, not being able to mourn the son we thought we knew. We had to act as if we were truly gone. We followed the news, watching from afar as the investigation into Michael intensified. Without our supposed silence, more evidence surfaced. Other victims came forward. The authorities eventually tracked him down. He was apprehended, tried, and convicted for his role in the fraud scheme. The news reports never mentioned us, of course. To the world, we were just two more missing persons, victims of an unfortunate accident at the cliff. Michael, in his desperation, never told anyone he pushed us. He thought he had erased us. He's serving a long sentence now, and I imagine he thinks he got away with our murder. We live a quiet life now, under new names, in a small, peaceful town. We have a small garden, a few friendly neighbors who know nothing of our past. We're safe, but the scars remain, deep and unhealing. The love for our son is a tangled mess of pain, betrayal, and an enduring, bewildering grief for the child we lost long before he pushed us off that cliff. We saved our lives, but at what cost? We lost our son, our home, our identity. We constantly look over our shoulders, wondering if he will ever figure out we're alive, if he will come looking for us again. It's a terrifying thought, a shadow that will forever hang over our new, fragile peace. So, that's our story. A story of a son's betrayal, a parent's impossible choice, and the desperate fight for survival. We made a decision that day, a split-second choice that saved our lives but shattered our world. Was it the right one? I honestly don't know. All I know is that we are alive, and we're trying to find a way to live with the ghosts of our past. Please, like this video if you were on my side, if you understand why we had to do what we did. Subscribe for more stories like this, and share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comment section. I truly need to hear what you all think. I'll see you all in the next story.